everyone, this is Paul Casey, the Kenpo Karate Hall of Fame educational video series, where we talk about Kenpo principles, concepts, sometimes the history, techniques, theories. Sometimes we'll get into terminology and application, and then we'll have special guests. And I'm really honored to have my good friend, founder of PKI, Mr. Todd Durgan. Todd's been in the martial arts a long time, and he will explain a little more about the system and why it's important. It's the next step, I believe, in the evolution of Ed Parker's Thinking Man Kenpo, which is really the foundation of what the Kenpo Karate Hall of Fame is all about. We try to bring that aspect to Mr. Parker's art. Though the art has grown and fractured into different styles within Kenpo, different ideas, and theories. The essential thing is Ed Parker's Kenpo lives on through us. And it's important, and it's probably more incumbent on us to look into his writings, seek out the knowledge that he's trying to pass on to us, and hopefully we'll have the wisdom to understand it a little bit better. It's an evolving kind of thing. So no further ado, let's bring in my good friend, Todd Durgan. Hello, Todd. How you doing, buddy?
How you doing, Mr. Casey? Good to see you again.
Good to see you, sir. Very much.
Happy to be here.
You want to tell briefly, maybe 30 seconds about who you are and what you do up in your neighborhood?
So, as Mr. Casey said, I'm Todd Durgan. I am currently teaching PHASIC Combatives Integrated. It is somewhat akin to the Dave German system, the Thai karate. I basically kind of reincorporated some judo, jiu-jitsu, both Japanese and Brazilian jiu-jitsu. That needs to be clarified, as well as some China and a subsystem of Eskrima that I developed particularly or specifically for the PKI. I spent my first 35 years in American Kenpo at Parker's Kenpo under Mr. A.C. Rainey. So just trying to make things better for myself and my students, help them get to a place of combative readiness sooner in their journey. And then we can play with all the cool stuff.
So we're going to talk about a few things that you like to accelerate in. We'll cover that. There is a term that Mr. Parker used in his development of the martial arts. I'm going to read the exact definition so that we can explain it, why it's important in Kenpo and especially with the development of power and other aspects regarding striking and etc. So I'm going to leave that at. It's either called gravitational marriage or the marriage of gravity. They're both similar. They mean the same thing. They're just being spoken differently. And it's the uniting of mind, breath, and strength while simultaneously dropping your body weight along with the execution of your natural weapons. Timing all of these factors with the dropping of your body weight greatly adds to the force of your strikes. This combined action literally causes a marriage with gravity. So that's why sometimes people use the word marriage of gravity, and makes vertical use of body momentum while employing the dimension of height. So we're going to jump on that. So let's talk about that, Todd. Let's talk about marriage of gravity and gravitational marriage. Can you help me a little bit out with that so that our viewers can get a better grasp on this?
So gravitational marriage is the idea, and I believe, and as some of the people that I've spoken with have agreed with me, and when I see people, I mean seniors, was a term used for the layman to have a visual idea or understanding that we are dropping our weight and our mass and or body alignment downward, either diagonally or directly downward vertically, to enhance the strike or whatever, strike block or action that we were executing. So while it was mostly meant to be an idea and or in my mind, in my understanding, meant to be more of a visual aid, like I said, it kind of conjures the idea of dropping, right? Because gravity pulls you down when you say gravitational marriage. So while that's true, there's lots of scientific and physics stuff behind that actually validates the concept.
Is it scientific or is it mathematical?
It's physics based,
Ah,
right?
see.
I
So
mean,
explain that to me a little bit.
well, so Kenpo is largely physics based, right? I mean, the constant rate the constant rate of gravity is 9.8 meters per second squared. And as one of my students likes to point out, that is in a vacuum. Okay. 9.8 meters per second squared. I want you to think about that. That's 9.8 meters per second per second. Okay. That's really fast. In mathematical, so if you do, so if you do the math, that's 4.5 million miles per hour.
I see.
Okay. And so that's moving. So the point is, and so while gravitational marriage is, and initially I kind of had this misconception that, well, you're not really ever going to move fast enough, or I'm sorry, long enough to have gravity affect you. But the reality of it is that if it's moving even half that fast, if it's pulling you even half that fast, then there is going to be while subtle, but there's still going to be that subtle difference between punching or dropping downward versus punching or moving upward, because you're not having to overcome the resistance of gravity.
Why don't we discuss real quickly the definition of Parker's encyclopedia, how he defines speed? And hopefully this will help the listener, and then you can jump in on this. But he defines it basically the three categories of speed as perceptual, mental, and physical. Okay, and these were basically categories set for the purpose of analyzing what speed entails. They nevertheless function as one. So let's break them down, because you're talking about speed. Go ahead. You want to comment? Go ahead.
So perceptual speed is what you see, what you perceive, right? Mental speed is how fast you think and how fast you process what you see. Okay. Physical speed is the actual speed or miles per hour with which you execute a punch or physical action.
You like to use physics. If we take the old saying, when I was back in high school, you took a feather and you take a ball and you drop them off the roof, they will travel at the same rate of speed. But this is where the gravitational marriage, or marriage of gravity, is going to come into play. Why does one seem to get there faster than the other? And you can answer that question, I know.
That's relative to mass.
Aha.
Right.
Is that the biggest problem we see then? People not be able to take and emphasize that speed with the power generated by the mass?
Right. So if you look at something like Kepler's first law of gravity, blah blah blah, I won't get into that, planetary rotation, but if you look at the planets, the larger the planet, the greater the gravity, right? Or the closer to the sun, the greater the gravity. Okay, because there's more pull, there's more mass. Okay, so it works in the opposite direction. If you have a larger mass dropping, it's going to have a greater impact than a smaller mass. They may travel at the same speed, but think about depth of penetration, right? So
is that what we're trying to focus in on? Depth of penetration when we use our Kenpo?
Well, it depends on what you want the resultant impact to be.
Let's take something simple.
So
Keep it simple.
Well, this is the thing. You can't say, okay, I'm going to focus on depth of penetration without having an understanding of what is the resultant impact. If I penetrate to a person's spine through their chest, what's going to happen? Their chest is going to cave in and they're probably going to die. So I have to now regulate my depth of penetration. I can do that through regulation of speed, regulation of power, right? which is the culmination or combination of a bunch of other things. So you can't say I'm just going to focus on, or we're just focusing on depth of penetration. It is a natural phenomenon or natural occurrence for depth of penetration of a heavier object to be greater than that of a lighter object because of the mass.
Okay, let's use an example most people would understand here in America. America's pastime is baseball. The ball's coming at you. If the one person, say they're, let's keep them equal. Both batters that are at the plate have the same height, weight, abilities in general. One is using a lightweight bat, and the other is using a heavier bat. What will be the result of them both hitting the ball?
Well, it could be a wash based on speed.
Okay.
But typically mass, the mass of one bat, the mass of the heavier bat, or the weight of the heavier bat, would overcome the weight of the ball more easily than the weight of the lighter bat, right? Now this is where it gets tricky, because when you incorporate, or you now integrate speed into that discussion, you can overcome some things with speed. Okay, I know that Mr. Sullivan has his acronym is ASP. It's accuracy, speed, and power. Okay, so he places speed in the second category as opposed to other people who place it in different categories.
Well, isn't it? It's sort of, we're chasing what's first, egg,
right,
or the chicken,
and you'll always chase it first.
And
so,
you're going to think, wow, that's
So speed. But see, this is the thing now. Grandmaster Hebler, he one of his favorite things to say was always, Kenpo is famous for speed, right?
Right.
Speed is our best friend, and speed is our worst enemy, because Kenpoists have a tendency to do things too fast. So speed needs to be regulated with timing, right, and appropriated with timing. If you have speed without proper timing, it doesn't matter.
Right.
You can be as fast as you want, but if you miss that ball, right? If you miss that ball that you're trying to hit at the base, but you can swing the bat faster than anybody else, does it matter? If you never hit the ball,
whiffed. Yeah, it's a whiff.
It makes no difference. So
right.
without timing, proper timing and good timing, speed is irrelevant.
The number one thing that we try to work on in the beginning is what Mr. Parker used to coin the most important attribute of the martial artist is coordination. Learning to coordinate between that. So when we watch a lot of young martial artists starting out, beginning belts, white through, gosh, I would even say up to maybe green. It's not till you really hit brown that you start to get this concept of gravitational marriage of gravity, by using the emphasis of dropping your body. But what is the key element at the same time? Breathing.
Right.
Breathing. And people don't understand that. Let me use a quote here.
But okay, while you're looking for that, I want to point out, you said coordination.
Yes, sir.
So ultimately, coordination is what? It's about timing.
Oh yeah.
It's about the timing. It's about the timing of your actions, one with the other, or all of them together, right? And that happens through the proper flexion and reflex and the muscle groups firing off. One's contracting and expanding, right? So that action, okay, creates a proper or improper timing. And so what happens is, let's say you have a 9-year-old, okay, because I have a couple of 9-year-old kids. They're doing really great, but their coordination is a little bit off. So they have to think to that muscle group and fire that muscle, and then they have to think to that other one. And it's a process of doing this over and over and over and over that creates that coordination, what you're calling coordination. And further practice and further development starts to develop a more finely tuned timing to in execution and practice.
Well, I think that the thing is, in that coordination of sequencing, as we've talked about, solidifying your base, get the great foundation, your basics, your basic Once you learn to coordinate with them, then those simplistic basics can be built upon, and then you can add more to the equation, or remove, or change, or alter, delete, the et cetera, the things that
Right.
Parker loved in the 80s when the computer was being brought in. But one of the factors that we see, and I know that you probably have run afoul of this many times, is then the breathing aspect. And the purpose of, I'm going to read what he says in here, and then I'm going to make a slight comment. He says in Infinite Insights, Volume 5, folks, and if you go to page 62, and it's under his chapter when he's talking about priorities of self-defense study. Now, this is important to him. So he knocked this out in the book, and he revisit this for a reason, which here is under the priorities that you have all these environment, range, position, stance, and maneuvers, et cetera. He gets to 10. Okay. Let's face it, you and I both, we can live without water for about 3 to 5 days, maybe. How long can you live without air?
Right.
Very, very little time. I mean, within seconds. And if you study and train with Todd Durgan and you have that experience, you'll be out of air in about
3 seconds.
That's down real quick with a nice little choke on me. Parker says here, breathing techniques used to ensure maximum power in protecting yourself are the 10th order of priority. Now, he's listing priorities, but we are breathing, but there's a reason for it. And I would rather defer to you, the students, to pick up these books and look at them and figure it out a little bit, and then ask questions. And if a teacher cannot explain this to you, then go outside of him with his permission or her permission and see somebody that may be able to help you. He says the importance of proper breathing as it relates to the martial arts cannot be overemphasized. He said to obtain maximum power in all of your endeavors requires proper breathing habits. The highly schooled student executing techniques will never perform them with maximum proficiency unless his breathing is in sync. What did Mr. Durgan just say? In sync. Combining this coordination, we learn how to do that. Only through timed, which you just mentioned, breathing, can you attain the spiritual unification, the powers of the mind, obviously is what he's saying, and the internal powers known to the martial arts as chi or ki. Let's face it, when you breathe, you become relaxed. When you don't breathe, you become uptight, intense. Get an example. You get scared. What do? Now, this is the perfect time with this time of year. You think about going to a scary movie or a scary ride or something. We love that. I don't know why we have this thrill of getting scared, but we know it's sort of the same, And unless you're walking down the dark alleys of up in Seattle, Washington, where crime is rampant.
Gotta wear your rubber boots.
I'm telling you right now. So breathing. So the synchronization of it, when you think about it, you've learned to coordinate a movement. But what makes it so efficient? By the use of the breath. And then how do we develop from there? So I'm going to turn it over to you, Todd. Walk us through why this is all important, all these facets. Go ahead.
So the breathing is and to highlight what you said, you can only go for a few seconds without breathing. So the first thought and understanding with the breath, besides the timing of power and chi and ki and all of those other things, is that you're feeding your brain oxygen and you're feeding your body oxygen. So if you're not breathing and you're not breathing properly or sporadically, then your body is falling out of time and out of sync, okay, mentally and physically. And it's separating, the two are separating, right? And when you have those two separated, then you start to falter in technique and you start to falter with everything else. And you start to become exasperated, and running out of oxygen in your body and your mind is a bad thing. That's why boxers run, fighters train, they run, they work on the cardio and all that, so that can, your brain can function fully as you're going through these bouts or these combatives. And so cardiovascular is one of the most important things a karateka could possibly do.
Frank used to say it, be it gassing out.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
as we get older, we become more well, we're not always, but we become more complacent in our activities, less
Yep.
movement. We
I'm
sit
guilty.
stationary. Yeah, well, I can be
Yeah.
that way too. So forcing yourself to eat properly and get the proper, exercise for cardiovascular. I think cardiovascular, be honest with you, is more important than most of the skills because though it has been the term has been used, be water, my friend. I would say more importantly is be air or oxygen because without that you're done.
Yeah.
And even in a fear situation, it's fight or flight. You can leave and win the fight by outrunning the guy. So if I'm with Todd and we decide to walk around in the woods up there in Seattle and a big bear comes, Todd, I was nice knowing you because I'm going to outrun you, pal.
You hope. You only got to
Two
run
reasons.
faster. You only got to run faster than the slowest person, right?
And that's you because I do cardio. And second of all, I don't know the terrain, but I'm going to get the hell out of there faster. Figure you can work it out with this guy. Okay. So the point is by learning that is an essential thing. So now we're looking at, so we're doing coordination. We're learning a sequence of motion. And by the way, if you get a chance, go and visit any of Todd's videos on YouTube. And Todd, what's the name of your YouTube channel?
Real easy. It's Kenpo Guy Productions.
There you go, Kenpo Guy Productions. That's just an introductory to what he likes to share. And it's really essential because Mr. Parker used to say how to do something is important, but knowing why you do it is more important because that means you're more of an instructor and you can share that knowledge and you can develop it. Parker always used those terms when he was in his seminars and in his books and his conversations with many people, including myself. So we're working this now. If you watch Mr. Parker move, and he was a very large man, about 6'1", probably at the time when I knew him, around 2.25, maybe a little more. He was also close to 59 years old when he passed. So the point is that, but he could sure still move very, very quickly because he embodied these principles. So walk me through, how does gravitational marriage or marriage of gravity work in a sequence of Kenpo moves, Todd? And break it down real basic for our listeners.
Well, what do you mean by how does it work?
Well, walk us through what's the biggest mistake most practitioners do when they're learning this.
Okay, so one of the biggest things, and this is an interesting. It'll be interesting for some people. Some people will boo-hoo it. I don't care. The forward bow, going to a forward bow actually employs gravitational marriage to a degree because there's a 10%, which actually there's a 20% weight shift or change, right? You're 10% on the back leg forward and 10% on the front leg. So when you move that 10% from the back to the front, from 50 to 40, right? 60-40. Anyway, that's why I say there's a 20% weight shift. So when you do that, you're dropping where you should be dropping. And yes, you should be moving slightly forward. It should be a very subtle movement, but it should be noticeable. The front knee should absorb some of that height. Okay. This is one of the most common mistakes I see, and I see it all over the internet. It's prevalent today. People do not pivot and they don't drop their weight. Okay. Now, you see people all the time just dropping their weight. They'll drop straight down, but unless you're on top of somebody, that's not doing any good. Diagonal motion has proven, in my experience anyway, to be the most effective means or method of utilizing gravitational marriage and or dropping, because it does a couple of things. It changes the mental process of your opponent. We don't assimilate, or we don't analyze, and we don't do well being struck or moved in a diagonal fashion because it causes both parts of our brain to react and activate. It's like depth. It's like a depth of action. So we have trouble perceiving depth of action because it takes both eyes and it takes a particular process. Your brain has to go through a completely different process than if you see this or this. Okay. You can close one eye and see width and see height, but you can't close one eye and pick up on depth very well. If you don't believe me, ask Mr. Hebler. So just like that, if we're not moving properly, not just downward, but forward or backward, diagonally, or from side to side with the strike, it's going to have a less effective application. And so going back to what you were talking about, let's take a wide kneel or a closed kneel, for example. It's one thing to drop into a wide kneel. Now, if I were over somebody, let's say I was going through some extension, I cross over and I drop down in a closed kneel with my knee on top of them, then that's going to be a straight down drop, and that's going to be employing gravitational merge, but it's also going to be employing backup mass or a proper alignment, right? Because my body is going to be at the top of the axis or the dropping line, okay, where the weight is, and pushes that knee down into them, or the ball, that foot, or whatever it is. So we have to have alignment in addition to dropping, okay? Because just dropping my hand is cool and all, and it might do something, but if I drop my hand and it's fused to my body, and I'm using more of what I call body fusion, where you're connected, it changes the dynamics of the action. One example of that would be in short form 2. The first move, you drop in with a block, and then there's this dropping and settling outward, downward, diagonal motion. And most people that I see, they do this, right? They have this big circular motion, and there's nothing happening with the body. There's nothing happening with actually dropping and actually employing gravitational marriage, okay?
Sure. Yeah, it's a common thing because we tend to think that everything is with our arms, and
right.
You'll see that in people using improper technique. They're more worried about how fast they can do this business where there's nothing there. It's like a lot of feathers just going like this.
Yep.
But if you take a nice big baseball bat and you go whap and you pull it down, I promise you, it may not be as pretty as all these feathers, but it will be 10 times more effective with the result, because it is coming down and through. Frank always used to say to me, when I would strike and I do a punch, and he was incorporating boxing techniques. So you'd have the jab, the cross, and the hook or uppercut. But whenever it came to these shots, that back shot, he made sure I dropped slightly, just an inch down, to emphasize it, to use gravity to increase the speed. Now, the speed is going to come up also with proper body alignment and the proper body rotation and torque. And if you put that back behind it, my friend, it's going to slam.
Yep.
Watch Mr. Parker's videos, and you will see him, and he will drop. And when he does that, he almost reverberates by going, because he's coming down through it. If you watch Todd do it, you will see that. But he's mentioned more effective because the movement is not like busybody. It's very precise. It's effective. The target presents itself. He comes down with the proper weapon, and he makes sure that it's the most effective strike he can or response. Strike that. It was the most proper response to the need of the attack.
It's also about being multidimensional instead of singular in dimension, which, I mean, really, if you think about it, if you're not considering moving in 2 or more dimensions, then you should not consider martial arts, because singular dimension is easy to overcome. Look at any hard style karate. They're singular in dimension most often, right? They're very linear, or they're very linear and power focused, right? So they move in order to be only power focused. You must move in a linear fashion, whether that's up and down or front to back. Okay, and you have to have different motors moving you, different vehicle. You have to move through a different vehicle if that's your only focus. When you move multidimensionally, It changes the dynamics of and or the effect of the strike on your opponent and or block, defensive or offensive, right? So, and what I mean by that is, you know, you're moving diagonally versus vertically or horizontally. You have a tremendous amount more effect on your opponent. Look at the first technique in the system, delayed sword, right? That outward hand sword is an outward, downward, diagonal hand sword. That block should be an inward. It comes across the body, right? And it uses that arc that Mr. Chappelle talked about, uses that arc, and that arc incidentally creates a diagonal cancellation on the body and on either the height, the depth, or the width, or two, right? So anytime, one of the things that I like to do is anytime, or tell my students, anytime you can cancel more than one dimension on your opponent, the merrier.
Oh yeah, so you can see that. That's the biggest mistake. Most times you don't see that. You'll see the individual do the inward block across himself.
Yep.
And it's not doing what we're talking about.
Right.
There's a nice little thing that we'll visit sometime with Todd about sequence rescripting. And he talks about that, and he uses the idea of the first technique, delayed sword, and how it is used in a different, same movements. So it appears if you were to do it in the air, it looks the same. However, the trick is when he shares that with you. And remember also, our system was based originally called Kenpo Jiu-Jitsu. All right. People don't understand it. The name Jiu-Jitsu was removed, and Parker cleaned up by just calling it Kenpo. Actually, saying Kenpo Karate was sort of redundant. That's like faster. If you think about it, it's really the same, very similar and different. But anyway, another thing that I share with you is there's a story Mr. Parker was with, and it was related to me. And I'm gonna leave names out because it's always best. I'm not here to attack anybody's system, style, discipline, whatever. The Hall of Fame actually embodies over 14 of them, and it will continue to grow because Kenpo is the law of the fist. All right, fist law, and it's used a lot by different arts. They like that term. They don't always call it Kenpo; they call it something else. But Parker was talking with one of the grandmasters in a Japanese system, and he was very excited to tell Mr. Parker that he discovered by dropping its weight when he hit it, he could increase his power and speed. And the comment by Ed Parker was, well, we've been doing that for a while. I'm glad you caught up. Sorry, I'm going to leave names out, folks.
Wow.
There's a reason for this.
That's funny.
Thinking there, you know? So by revisiting stuff and talking about it, it's important that we as martial artists expand, you know, and not limit ourselves to just the written word. There needs to be interpretation of the word. There needs to be growth with the word. It bothers me when I hear somebody says, I don't use that. My thought is if you're a graduate of the Ed Parker system, and I say graduate, you're a black belt, wherever your rank, forget the rank thing. That's Parker addresses that. I'm actually, you know what? While we're on the subject, I'm going to comment.
Yeah, look in book 2, page 10, look at the titles, and the titles in themselves say that you should be progressing, not just physically, but educationally, right?
All his books relate to this. He just cleaned it up. But
Right.
he says in belt rankings, although belt colors show, they are no proof that you know.
Mm.
You know, what you earn, you get. That's one of those things with him. He uses those kind of analysis because really the bottom line, you can't wear that belt out on the street. And you need to be able to live up to it for your own self-defense, your own ability. A lot of people, they feel they got there. I use the analogy of the Icarus story about walking around in the Greek story based on this mortal that thought he was a god, made his wings out of wax, put feathers on it, and tried to touch the sun because he was a god, because he thought he was powerful. And as we know the ending, the wings melted, he fell to earth to his untimely death. Please don't allow that to be your own demise, folks, because of a failure to understand that there are limitations and no one is perfect. And in the end, we all will meet our maker, I hope, in a good way. But just don't accelerate the process by being stupid, okay? And what can I say? So let's talk about, I want to let you continue on with it because I think it's really important to have this time with you. You hit this succinctly. So let's talk about, so now we've understand the sequence of motion. We've understand we need to coordinate, which is the collective efforts of everything. We need to have our breath behind it in the marriage of gravity or the gravitational marriage. How do we build more power in our response? And it doesn't matter if you're 6'5" or 5'6". How can we maximize that, Todd, through?
Well, if you're talking about just in general, that goes back to everything that we just talked about with regard to timing, right? Timing and breath. Okay. So when you coordinate all of the muscle groups together, okay, you're gonna end up with a more effective unit. Now, that being said, you will not ever be the maximum that you can be if you cannot first relax and then explode. Okay. Because muscles have to be relaxed. They have to be in a relaxed state before they can tense with their full capacity, right? Or their full potential, I'm sorry. Okay. And so most people have a tendency to be in a semi-relaxed state, which you can kind of get away with, but this is the problem. When if you're not able to relax and then explode, what will happen is if you're trying to be faster, your body will unknowingly or unwittingly try to relax first before it explodes and before it's fast, which becomes a telegraph. So to answer your question, how do I get more power? It's through the coordination of breath, right? Mind, body, and spirit. And that happens through the body part happens through the relaxation, right? The mind part of it happens through understanding. The spirit part of it happens through the breath.
How do we train that though?
Well, it's easy.
Well, then share
practice.
So wise
practice. You have to look, just like practicing penmanship. You have to practice relaxing. You can do it through meditation. You have to practice breathing. You can do it through meditation. You have to practice being in tune with your body. Guess what? You can do it through what? Meditation. You don't have to meditate, but you can also do all of those things through repetition. But this is the thing, and this is where most people fall down, is that we have to be honest with ourselves in where we're at any given time in what we're doing. So if I'm practicing something, okay, typically when I practice something and I really want to educate myself and I really want to improve, I will videotape it. Okay. I think 150 videos on YouTube. Most of them are private for my students and or for the poster videos. But I have hundreds of hours of myself on video watching my forms, my sets, my techniques in demonstrations and technique lines and all of those other things. And I look at every element: feet, torque, body rotation, body drop, gravitation, all of those things. I'm looking at all of those. And you can tell if you're relaxed or if you're tense when you're watching that. But again, you have to be honest. Most people look at themselves and they go, man, I look good. Right?
Yeah.
I mean,
okay.
Look,
I spent a
Black
lot
Belt
of time.
Jones.
Yeah.
Black Belt Jones in Enter the Dragon. What did he say? He said,
I'll be too good.
He said, I might go down.
Looking good.
I might go down, but I'm going to be looking good doing it.
Yeah.
Right.
It's funny is that we do spend, when I was there in Pasadena, a lot of people, now it depends on how we were running with the purpose of the teaching and whatnot. But I always allocate, and still to this day, I allocate the first 5 minutes to put in clearing our minds and emptying it and relaxing through meditation and holding that stance. Though my students hate it because I'll hold them in a deeper, horse stance, which takes me back to the era of Steve Herring. And Steve, he had the most intense horse stance I've ever seen. And he would sit there and he would do a form almost literally like he was sitting And it was
I've seen him.
incredible.
Yeah, he was
One of the
incredible.
most incredible human beings I've ever met. Wonderful, gifted man, taken too soon. But the purpose of that was to train us to understand, to clear, so that we were relaxed. So the fluidity, and I am more of a fan of the fluidity of oxygen flowing through you than trying to visualize water. Not that it, but we are 98% water anyway.
Mm.
So, but the point is that to do that, another technique that I use is that I will have the student, and I will do this myself. I will close my eyes and execute, say, a form or a technique and feel it through the flow rather than to rely on the visualization of where it is. And the other way I do that is through sticky hands. Frank loved that, and just to feel that, so you have the flow with your student, and that goes into what Mr. Chappelle talks about as contact manipulation, because we're now into that zone of where it is, and that's what you're about, because not always is it you'll have the ability to strike that individual because of the distance you have. You might be in a closer proximity, so now you have to manipulate it, and that's what we talk about, the rescripting of a movement in a technique that is the first out of the box.
Right.
Am I right?
So yeah. So to be fair, Mr. Chappelle, Doc Chappelle, he's not all about contact manipulation. What he does is he, with the subcategories and the sub.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm not saying that that's it, but he shows that where
Right.
and it helps to bring you into a context of where we're at.
Yeah, absolutely. But I just wanted to point out he's also big on control manipulation and understanding the difference. And I'm not going to go into that.
Yeah, we will take that on right now.
So,
but the point is, it's really, we don't realize that what we really come from. And I think what we evolved in the 80s was more strike oriented. We were putting more emphasis on punch techniques and be able to hold out and strike and then hold the pose like Madonna. And
look at what happened in the 90s when the UFC started. All of a sudden it flipped the script. Everybody all of a sudden wanted to do jiu-jitsu. Right before that, karate, kung fu, striking arts were more popular. They were more prevalent. They were on every corner. Post 90s, now you have jiu-jitsu and more of the grappling arts on every corner than you do the striking arts. So it's, and now you're coming into, now you're seeing what is, what 30 years later starting to become more people with a more well-balanced menu that they're giving.
We don't have to master every art. We just have to understand what their strengths are and what their weaknesses are. Right. And most of the arts that you're mentioning that deal with grappling and whatnot are not striking arts. They're into the situation where they take possession of you in a contact manipulation, take you choke, get you down on the ground and whatnot. But they don't take into consideration the 8 considerations that you have to be aware that there may be other jackals there to jump on you. And 2 is the environment allowing you to go to the ground. What if there's glass and it's wet and it's uneven or whatever, and it's dark, and do you really want to be rolling around on that stuff? And I mean, in a life or fight or flight scenario, you got to do what you got to do. Right. Barker would be the first one to tell you, you're there, get out of there as fast as you can, do the damage and leave.
Yeah. So to be fair to the jiu-jitsu people, because I don't want them to think we're beating up on them.
No, we're not. But we do beat up on them.
So there are they do have street applications where they're not going to the ground. They're not spending any time on the ground, or if they do, they're working on getting out of there.
We do too. We do too.
Absolutely.
I know you know this stuff. I'm not.
Absolutely.
There's things that we're not talking about here, folks, that I think you get more out of it, and this doesn't allow us to. But you get some time with Todd, you'll understand, or at least look at his videos, and it'll spark your interest and go, aha. So what are the 3 again there, Todd?
Perceptive, mental, or I'm sorry, perception, mental, and physical.
Okay.
Perceptual.
So we take all those and coordinate them, and then the proper use of the backup mass will have with your rotation. Torque will be caused out of that, and that will cause
Power.
power. Exactly. And that's what we're looking at. So I think that
Damage.
yeah, I mean, you look at it, you see that in other arts that say kicking arts. They'll get that and they'll do that, the spin. But when it comes to the problem is they don't know how to deal with it in a close range. It's very difficult for them. Others that don't deal with that, like the jujitsu and the grappling arts, their strength is when they get in close and they're hands-on now. Okay. So the balance is with American thinking that Ed Parker was thinking with Kenpo is the balance of both and how it's utilized. And if you go into our system, you'll understand that. Anyway, any final thoughts there, Todd, before we end?
Yeah, here's a final thought. 1 mile an hour is equivalent to 1.4666667 feet per second.
And your point is?
Well, the gravitational speed, that whole thing I was talking about, is the true speed of gravity is basically 32 feet per second, right? 32, yes. That's 32 feet per second squared, roughly 4.5 miles and blah, blah, blah. So just to understand the feet per second, 1 mile an hour, or understand the 4.5 million miles per hour, 1 mile per hour is equivalent to 1.466, basically 1.5 feet per second. So every second you're traveling 1.5 feet.
Which is pretty damn fast.
Which is right.
Yeah. Especially if you're efficient.
18 inches.
Understand the principle and you work at this and not flail your arms, but understand the basic principles of what Mr. Parker was trying to convey to us. And with that, I want to say thank you very much, Todd. It is always a pleasure having you on here and bring this forth, and that we'll look at more subjects. And I hope this piques the interest of our viewers so that they'll understand a little more about working on the principles of gravitational marriage, or the marriage of gravity, and how it applies in a Kenpo setting, sequencing, and learning how to coordinate, how to breathe, and how to incorporate your backup mass to be the most effective, efficient response with power. No further ado, my name is Paul Casey. Thank you for watching the Kenpo Karate Hall of Fame Zoom. Todd Durgan, salute.
Thank you, sir.